A number of voters I talked to as they were having breakfast in the last couple of days are saying for them, immigration is the top issue as well. But there is another one that is rapidly emerging on the campaign trail. And joining us now to talk more about that and other issues facing the voters is presidential candidate Nikki Haley. Governor, it's great to see you. Spend some more time with you. Appreciate you coming.
Great to see you. It's a great day in South Carolina. The sun is shining. People are out voting. It's going to be a good turnout today.
It is a great day. There's no question about that. Wanted to ask you about this because this is something that has really exploded on the campaign trail in just the last few hours, and that's the IVF ruling by the Alabama Supreme Court. In response to it earlier in the week, you said this about their finding that frozen embryos count as unborn children. Listen here.
I mean, embryos to me are babies. I mean, I had artificial insemination. Yeah. That's how I had my son.
That ignited some controversy, your declaration that embryos count, you say, as babies. Now the Democrats are trying to pin this on Republicans by saying this is what happens when you overturn Roe v. Wade. Do you, in fact, believe that frozen embryos are babies? And what would you recommend Republicans do in response to this ruling?
So first of all, the Democrats are hoping for another hot button issue. And the thing is, this again, yes, I personally believe embryos are babies, just like I am pro-life. But that doesn't mean everybody else has to think that embryos are babies. What is very important, I had to have fertility treatments to have both of my children. We are blessed when we can have these treatments and those options are available. We always want fertility options to be available to parents as they are trying to have babies of their own. But we also want to make sure that any decisions made with the embryos, it needs to be between the parents and the physician, period. This is a very sensitive subject. It requires a lot of respect. Let it happen between the parents and the physician. We don't need government getting involved in it. We want to make sure embryos are respected and protected properly, and we want to make sure that the conversations between the physicians and the patients are confidential and kept so that they are the ones that make that decision.
All right, so fair to say you're standing by that comment, Governor. This is your rival, Donald Trump, on IVF. He said this at a rally last night. Listen.
I strongly support the availability of IVF. The Republican Party should always be on the side of the miracle of life.
Seems the two of you are finding agreement on the issue.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we want to make sure that parents like Michael and I can have children when we have other physical challenges. And so I'm very grateful for the blessings of my two children. I want every parent to have that same opportunity. And I hope that we won't see government start to intrude and get involved in these conversations between parents and physicians. It's a very private situation, and I think it should stay that way.
All right. Well, we'll see how this all evolves, because some folks in the Alabama legislature, including Senator Tim Melson, who'll be joining us later on this program, are trying to put in a fix there to make sure the parents who want to go through IVF have got legislative protections. I want to ask you about this question, because this could be a big issue in the primary today, and that is crossover voters. I want to put up on the screen the number of Democrats who voted in the primary here in South Carolina in 2020, 540,062. compared to 132,057 who voted in the Democratic primary that was held back on February the 3rd. The rules here in South Carolina state that there's no party affiliation in terms of voter registration, and you can play in any primary you want as long as you only play in one. So there are 408,000 Democrats who did not play in the Democratic primary earlier this month. And there are a lot of people, including former President Trump, governor, who say, you're trying to get them to vote for you. Here's what he said last night.
Nikki Haley is relying on Democrats and liberals. Who the hell wants Democrats voting in a Republican primary? What is that about?
So what do you say to that, Governor, that you not only try to attract Republicans and like-minded independents, but Democrats, too, just to mess with former President Trump?
I mean, he's whining and complaining again. The reality is the reason 400,000 people didn't vote in the Democratic primaries because they don't love Joe Biden. I mean, you look at the fact that 60% of Americans think Joe Biden and Donald Trump are too old to be president. You can't blame them if they don't choose a person because they don't think he's doing a good job. I think Democrats see the problems with Joe Biden. I think a lot of Republicans see the problems with Donald Trump. And 70% of Americans say they don't want either one. They're the two most disliked politicians in America. That's a fact. And so Americans are now looking for a different choice. And we welcome that. But it's also the reason why I say there is a problem. Donald Trump cannot win a general election. He can't. Look at the Marquette poll this past week. He's margin of error with Joe Biden again. I defeat Joe Biden by 18 points. Why is that? Because not only do I get Republicans, I also get independents who are coming back to our Republican Party, and we're moving conservative Democrats over to the Republican Party. That's what we want. We want to expand our tent in the party, as opposed to what Donald Trump's doing, saying anybody that supports me is barred permanently from MAGA. If you're running for president, you don't shun people out of your club. You bring people in because our policies are the best policies to lift up everyone. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do, is try and bring more people into our party, not push them out.
Ambassador, can I get you to weigh in on the day? We've got some live pictures up of Greenville while you were talking there, South Carolina. Charleston, we've seen some long lines as well. People are heading out to the polls. There seems to be a lot of energy to get the vote out there. We know the expectations, okay? We've been putting this up on the screen day after day. We've been asking the same question, how long you want to stay in. So set this up for us. How are you going to measure the evening, and are you still vowing to stay in this race through Super Tuesday?
Well, I will tell you how I'm measuring the day. Today was a day of complete gratitude. I had the opportunity to go to the voting booth with my mom. My mom was a lawyer in India. She was picked to be one of the first female judges to sit on the bench, but because of the times, it was too hard, and she was never able to do that. She was able to stand with me as she voted for her daughter for President of the United States. That's a pretty amazing example of how blessed we are to live in America. So that is what I feel today. I feel a lot of gratitude towards my family. I feel a lot of gratitude towards the people of South Carolina. It was a blessing to serve the state that raised me. It's been a blessing to defend the country at the UN that I love so much. And that's why I'm fighting for America. I think we have a country to save, and we're not letting our foot up off the gas. We're getting through South Carolina today. We're headed to Michigan tomorrow. Then we're headed to Super Tuesday states. America deserves better. And more than that, the younger generation deserves better. They deserve to know what normal is. And that's what I'm trying to give them.
Governor, knowing your story, having read your books, having your mother have the opportunity to vote for her daughter as president probably was a very big moment for her. I want to ask you about another issue that is very prominent in this election. It drove voters to the polls in New Hampshire, drove them to the polls in Iowa. To a great degree, it's going to drive them to the polls here in South Carolina. And that is the issue of illegal immigration, the dangers of which were really driven home yesterday when Nikki Haley was found dead on Thursday on the campus of the University of Georgia. And a man who entered this country illegally through the El Paso sector, believed to be from Venezuela, is being held in connection with her murder. Where do your thoughts run today on that whole issue?
I am completely disgusted. My heart breaks for this family. But more than that, it makes me angry. It makes me angry at Joe Biden that he refuses to go and really make this a #1 priority. This makes me angry for Congress, who shouldn't be taking a break this week and be on vacation. They should be in Congress doing whatever it takes to pass a strong border bill. This makes me angry at Donald Trump, who told Congress not to pass anything until after the general election, because it would affect him. We can't wait one more day. Congress needs to get in a room, figure this out, pass a strong illegal immigration bill, and Donald Trump needs to stay out of it, because we are losing too many Americans for reasons that we should not be doing this. In South Carolina, I passed the toughest illegal immigration law in the country. President Obama sued us over it, and we won. We need to get this right. We can't wait one more day. It is unacceptable that we are putting Americans in danger this way, and it is time that something gets done, and there is no time to wait.
Ambassador, I finally want to ask you on this second anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. Obviously, Ukraine continues to hold out hope. Here is President Zelensky talking to Brett on Special Report in Ukraine. Listen.
We just want to live, to survive. We don't have alternative. We are fighting for the common values. So let's help us and let's support. Let's be in unity.
2 years into this war, how would you choose as president to handle Putin's war on Ukraine?
Well, I wouldn't do what Trump did and side with Putin and say that he would encourage Putin to invade our allies. I wouldn't side with a dictator who kills his political opponents. I wouldn't side with a thug who goes and arrests American journalists and holds them hostage. And I wouldn't side with a madman who's made no bones about wanting to destroy America. I would side with our allies who stood with us after 9/11. And I think when you look at what Zelensky's going through, this is a pro-American, freedom-loving country that's fighting for its very survival. If Ukraine wins this, China won't invade Taiwan. But we also need to look at what happens if Ukraine loses this. Putin has made it very clear that once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries, and that puts America at war. This is about preventing war. We've got to do everything we can to prevent war. And when Donald Trump went and sided with Putin, he immediately put our allies in more danger. He immediately empowered Putin, and he immediately put our military members who are sitting on the ground there in danger. And now you see Putin has started to put troops around the Baltic countries. Donald Trump pushed us further into war as opposed to pulling us back. And Joe Biden keeps putting his head in the sand, which isn't solving anything. We need to go and give them the equipment and ammunition they need to finish this so they can finally be done and we can put an end to Putin.
Governor, good to catch up with you again. Thanks for taking time to be with us. Good luck today.
Thank you so much.